She walked out the front door at 4:16 p.m., wearing jeans she hasn't fit into since 2017, red lipstick she said made her look ridiculous, and carrying our wedding album like she was returning it to a public library. She didn't say a word, didn't slam the door, didn't yell, didn't even look at me. She just opened the passenger side of a gray Buick that I'd never seen before and sat down like she'd done it 100 times. I was barefoot, still holding a spatula. The skillet behind me hissed, popping oil onto the stove while our lunch burned. It smelled like betrayal and garlic. I didn't follow her. I didn't run after the car. I just stood there, one sock on, listening to the ticking of the kitchen clock, the one she insisted we hang in the hallway because it sounded too sad in the kitchen. The irony. No note, no warning, no argument. She just left, with our memories under her arm. That was 3 hours ago. Since then I've burned my hand trying to clean the pan. Cried once. No, twice. No, once but for a long time. Checked her location, still off. And found something in her nightstand that I can't even explain yet. If I'm going to tell this right, I have to go back 12 days. Not years. Not decades. Just 12 days. Because 12 days ago, I thought my wife was planning a surprise party for our 20th anniversary. But what I found instead, it wasn't a party. It was a plan. I didn't realize it was a map at first. It looked like one of those dumb Pinterest journaling projects Joellen used to guilt herself into starting every January. All linen paper, tiny sketches, tea-stained edges, and phrases like soul work and alignment scrawled in a handwriting that looked suspiciously not hers. But when I pulled it out of the envelope tucked under the floorboard of her closet, yes, under the floorboard, I saw cities. Lines. Circles. Dotted trails connecting places we'd never been together. Santa Fe. Asheville. Helena. Richmond. Some marked with dates. Others with single letters in red ink. A, B, F, R. One had 3 red stars beside it. Eureka. And at the bottom, in black pen, leave no residue. Take only the clean. I know how that sounds. Cryptic, dramatic, maybe even fake. But when I tell you I stood there in the closet, holding that folded sheet with trembling fingers, I swear to you I felt like I'd just broken into someone else's life. Like this thing, this map, belonged to a version of Joellen I had never met. And it rattled me. Joellen doesn't even like maps. She once got lost between 2 Target entrances and nearly cried. So who made this? And why did she hide it under the floorboards, wrapped in old tights? I didn't ask her about it. Not right away. Because something about that map told me I wasn't supposed to know it existed. So instead, I put it back exactly how I found it, and I waited. Like a coward. Like a man who wanted to be wrong. The next day, she left her phone in the bathroom while taking a call on the back porch. That's when I saw his name. Emery. Not saved with a last name. Not saved with a heart or a code name or an emoji. Just Emery, like he was family. And maybe in her head, he was. Their last exchange was 3 days earlier. She wrote, "I've picked Eureka. It feels right." And he responded, "Then that's where we begin." I didn't even know what Eureka was. I had to Google it. A tiny coastal town in Northern California. We'd never been there. We had no family there. Nothing tied her to it, or so I thought. That night, I lay next to her in bed and watched her sleep, listening to the faint, wheezing breath she always denied having. I wanted to shake her awake, hold up the map, scream at her to explain what the hell Eureka means, but I didn't. Because deep down, I wasn't ready to hear the answer. 12 days ago, I was still clinging to a fantasy. I told myself maybe she was planning a surprise road trip for us, some elaborate anniversary redemption arc. Maybe this Emery guy was a planner, a travel agent, a cousin I'd somehow forgotten. But then came the hotel charge. 3 nights at a seaside inn in Eureka, booked under her maiden name. I found it while looking at our shared banking app. It was hidden, not in our main account, but from her old personal card she hadn't used in years. The one she swore she shredded after we merged finances. And that's when the weight in my chest changed from confusion to grief. She wasn't planning a surprise. She was planning an exit. Not a chaotic one. Not a runaway, torch it all and go kind of exit. No. Joellen was planning something elegant. Quiet. Thorough. Like a surgeon with a scalpel. Like a woman who had rehearsed this before. I could have stopped her then. I could have confronted her. Maybe begged. Maybe threatened. But I didn't. I wanted to know how far it would go. How far she would go. Because something in my gut told me this wasn't just an affair. This was a replacement. There's a kind of silence that doesn't just settle in a house. It soaks into it. It was the Saturday morning after I found the hotel booking, and Joellen was humming in the kitchen. Humming. Like she was in a shampoo commercial. She was making eggs. I watched her crack each one with that same careless grace she always had. The way her wrist flicked just enough to split the shell clean in half. No mess. She was wearing my old college hoodie. Smelled like citrus. I remember thinking, this is what it must feel like to live in a painting someone else painted for you. Beautiful, but completely fake. I told her I was going to take the car in for a tire rotation. She kissed my cheek and told me to pick up some more of that oat milk she liked. It was so casual, so domestic, like she hadn't just made a quiet reservation to vanish from my life in 3 weeks. Like she wasn't plotting a full-scale personal evacuation under my nose. But I didn't go to the mechanic. I drove 2 blocks, parked in front of the old laundromat, waited 10 minutes just to make sure she wouldn't suddenly call to ask me anything. Then I turned around and went back. I parked a few houses down so she wouldn't see the car if she looked out the window. Heart pounding, palms sweaty. Yes, I know how cliché that sounds. I crept back into my own house like a burglar. Every footstep felt criminal. Every floorboard groaned like it was judging me. I went upstairs, into our bathroom. The moment I opened the medicine cabinet, I knew. Her toothbrush was gone. Now look, this isn't a movie. People misplace toothbrushes. Drop them. Toss them by mistake. But this wasn't some flimsy pink thing from the drugstore. This was her electric Quip toothbrush, the one I bought her 2 birthdays ago. She loved that thing. Carried it on every trip. Used to call it her second spine. That's how attached she was to it. And now? Vanished. To be clear, she hadn't packed anything else. Her clothes were still in the drawers. Makeup untouched. Hairbrush in place. It was only the toothbrush. That one, single, intentional subtraction. That was the moment everything clicked. She was staging her escape in layers. Removing things little by little so I wouldn't notice. So that when she finally left, her absence wouldn't be loud. It would be clean. Sterile. Like she was never there at all. And that's when I broke. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, toothbrush drawer still open, and just stared into space like some sad sitcom character after the laugh track cuts out. Because suddenly it wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about erasure. This wasn't just a woman cheating on her husband. This was a woman preparing to remove herself from his reality with surgical precision. I started noticing other missing things over the next few days, tiny things I would have never thought to notice before. A mug her father gave her that she always used on Sundays? Gone. Her grandfather's fishing hat from the attic? Disappeared. One pair of black hiking boots she only wore once a year, but swore were her apocalypse shoes. Missing. And all of it so subtle, so staggered, that if I hadn't known to look, I never would have known they were gone. She was deleting herself. Digitally, physically, emotionally. Pulling the thread until the whole sweater unraveled. And I was the only one still trying to wear it. But the worst part? She smiled more now. She laughed more. Like this wasn't grief for her, it was relief. As if the marriage had been something heavy she'd been dragging behind her. And with every toothbrush, every pair of socks, every receipt that disappeared from the drawer, she felt a little lighter. And I started asking myself, had she always been planning this? Or had I missed something years ago? Was I just a warm body holding the space until she had enough guts to go? The answers, of course, wouldn't come from her lips. They were tucked somewhere deeper. And I found the first real one in the garage. I had never opened that box before. Not in all the years we lived in this house. It sat in the garage, wedged between the backup generator and a stack of spare tires I'd kept for a truck we sold 5 years ago. Joellen had labeled it Winter Decorations, Fragile, Do Not Stack, in her perfectly round, overly neat handwriting that always looked like it came from a schoolteacher's chalkboard. I never touched it. I never needed to. Every December, she'd pull out her snowflake candles, her silver garlands, and those obnoxious porcelain reindeer with the tiny bells on their hoofs. I assumed that box was where they lived the rest of the year. But now I knew better. Now I saw everything as camouflage. I opened it on a Sunday afternoon while Joellen was out getting groceries. Or at least that's what she said. I waited for the sound of her tires fading down the street, then slipped into the garage like a teenager sneaking out at midnight. I pulled the box down carefully. It was heavier than I expected. Not decorations, heavy, dense heavy. packed with something solid. Not soft tinsel or fake snow. The tape was layered. 3 strips across the top, 1 around the middle. All of it looked untouched, clean, no dust. That alone should have been suspicious. Everything else in that corner had a light layer of garage grime on it, but not this box. It might as well have been packed yesterday. I took a utility knife and sliced it open. What I saw made my throat close. No candles, no garlands, no reindeer. Instead, on top, was an envelope. A thick, padded one, with my name on it. In pen. No stamp. No seal. Just waiting. Beneath that was a stack of old photo albums, but not our albums. These were pictures I'd never seen before. Joellen, maybe 10 years ago, with people I didn't recognize. One photo caught my eye immediately. Joellen sitting on a dock beside a man with jet black hair and a scar on his cheek. They weren't touching, but their knees were almost too close. She was smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. Full, real, unrestrained. Like someone had just told her something wonderful. There was no date, no label, nothing. But I could feel it. That photo had weight, history, and under the albums, a burner phone, still charged, still working. My hands shook as I opened it. Only one number in the contacts, labeled E. I didn't dare click the messages yet. My heart was thudding too loud. I needed to understand what I was even looking at first. I went back to the envelope. I opened it. Inside was a typed letter. No greeting, no signature, just words that might as well have been knives. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get out clean. It means you started looking. I hoped I'd be long gone by now, but if not, here it is. I'm sorry. I never stopped loving the version of you I married. But that version died years ago. You just didn't notice. I tried to wait for you to come back, but eventually I realized you weren't lost. You just settled. You gave up on growing, and I couldn't keep shrinking to fit your comfort. So I planned my exit the only way I could. Quietly, cleanly, without damage. The truth is, I've had one foot out for years. I just didn't know when I'd be brave enough to move the other. But I finally met someone who didn't ask me to dim anything. Someone who didn't mistake stillness for peace. By the time you read this, I'll be living under my name again. My real one. You know what it is. You just chose to forget. Please don't come looking for me. You won't like what you find. I sat in the dark garage, that letter in my lap, with only the hum of the freezer motor beside me. And for the first time since all of this started, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I just numbed out. Because here was proof, not just of betrayal, but of premeditation, of precision, of a woman who had decided long ago that she was done and had built an entire ghost exit behind the walls of our life. She had mapped her escape like a military operation, and I was the enemy base she was deserting. And still, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Because she was right. I did stop noticing her. I had stopped growing. But what she didn't know was that I was changing. Slowly, quietly, in ways she never saw because she stopped looking. And now I was left in the wreckage of my own delay. But I still had that phone. And when I finally opened the messages, everything changed. I didn't expect to recognize him. Not in the way I did. Not immediately. But as soon as I tapped open the text thread on that burner phone and saw the photo he'd sent her, it all clicked into place. Not a nude. Not a selfie. Just a grainy picture of a diner sign at night, blinking the word open under a dying fluorescent light. Levy's Diner, since 1969. A place I hadn't thought about in over 15 years. But I knew that diner. And I knew that man. Because I had met him once. A long time ago. Back when Joellen and I were still trying to fix things. It was after our second miscarriage, back in 2011. She was depressed, but refused to call it that. Said she just needed space, time, something creative to hold on to. She started taking these weekend trips to breathe, as she put it. Sometimes with her sister. Sometimes alone. One of those weekends, she'd gone upstate to write and walk, and when she came back, she had this glimmer in her eyes. I remember it so clearly, that haunting, half-lit sparkle. She'd made a new friend, she said. A guy who ran the art gallery next to the diner she liked to eat at. Totally platonic, she told me, brushing it off with a casual wave. His name's Emery. Don't be weird. I didn't press. I wanted to trust her. But now, staring at this burner phone in my garage, scrolling through messages dated years back, I realized the truth. That friendship never ended. It just went underground. There were hundreds of messages. They weren't always romantic, at least not at first. It started off like two people trauma bonding. They talked about grief, about numbness, about books they loved, films they pretended to hate just to seem tougher. They shared playlists. Inside jokes. She called him E. He called her Jade, which made my blood go cold. That was her middle name. Something she hated. Said it sounded artsy and fake. She never let me use it. But for him, that's who she chose to be. As the years went on, the tone changed. Flirty, confessional, regretful, then bold, then explicit. But what hurt the most wasn't the sex stuff. It was the intimacy. The kind of intimacy that comes from daily attention. From someone who asks how you slept and actually waits for the answer. He remembered everything. Her fears, her insecurities, the scar on her hip from the bike accident in '09. The way she liked the sound of distant trains at night, but not too close. The almond-shaped birthmark on her left thigh she used to joke was a bad geography tattoo. He remembered. And I forgot. At one point, 2 years ago, she wrote, "He's starting to notice I'm not there anymore. I think he feels it, but he won't say it." And Emery replied, "He doesn't know how to see you anymore. But I do. I always did." I dropped the phone. Literally, dropped it on the garage floor like it had burned me. I backed away from it like it might detonate. I didn't cry. I didn't even breathe. I just stood there, the air buzzing like a broken transformer in my ears. I was so stupid, so comfortable in my own version of our marriage. I thought stability meant love. I thought her silence meant peace. She hadn't been silent. She'd just been talking to someone else. But here's the thing. Emery wasn't just some stranger with a typewriter and a beard. I remembered him from Levy's. Back in 2013, when I surprised Joellen by showing up unannounced for lunch. She panicked. Said she couldn't meet that day, stomach bug. I believed her. But that afternoon, on my drive back, I stopped to get gas across the street from Levy's. And there she was, outside, laughing, sitting on the hood of a silver Honda next to a man with black hair, smoking American spirits. I assumed he was a local, a friendly artist, just small-town weirdness, nothing more. But now I knew. That was Emery. She chose not to introduce me. She hid him in the folds of our marriage like a bookmark in a novel she never stopped reading. I went back upstairs, shell-shocked, dazed, and sat on the edge of our bed. The silence of the house felt like it had teeth. I looked around at everything I used to think was ours. The framed wedding photo on the nightstand, the old quilt from her aunt, the dumb incense tray that always made me sneeze. All of it felt like props, like a set. I wondered how long she'd been acting. And then I saw it, tucked in the corner of her nightstand drawer beneath an old passport. A single post-it note. All it said was, July 17th, garage, 8 p.m., do not forget. I checked the date. It was July 17th, and it was 7:41 p.m. I didn't turn on the garage light. Instead, I pulled the cord on the overhead bulb just enough to leave it hanging in that halfway position. Loose contact, no power, but still pretending to belong. That felt appropriate. Symbolic, if I wanted to be poetic. And at 7:52 p.m., I crouched behind the stacked moving blankets and the aluminum ladder, barely breathing, already ashamed of myself for being there. My knees ached, and my fingers went numb gripping the side of the toolbox, but I didn't move. Not when the minutes dragged. Not when the shadows shifted. Not when the silence grew too thick. I could have walked away. I should have. But I had to see. Because at that point, this wasn't just about Joellen cheating. It wasn't about Emery, or the burner phone, or the photo albums, or even the envelope with my name on it. It was about the fact that for 20 years, I thought I was the center of her story, the hero, or maybe the tired old narrator. But I wasn't even a character. I was just the set dressing. And I needed to know what the story actually was. The real one. The version I was never allowed to read. At 8:07 p.m., the side door opened. No knock. No hesitation. She had a key. Of course she did. She came in like she'd done it 100 times before, because she had. Just never when I was watching. Joellen stepped into the garage wearing a gray raincoat and carrying a canvas tote bag. Her hair was tied back, loose strands falling around her neck, and she looked exactly how she used to look when she'd run late to book club. Normal. Casual. Unbothered. She stood in the middle of the room and pulled something out of the bag. At first, I thought it was a notebook, but it was thicker, bound in leather. And when she placed it on the workbench and flipped it open, I saw the first page, a grid of names and dates. A log. A record. That's when I realized This wasn't a meeting. This was a handover. Emery entered 2 minutes later. He didn't knock either. He was taller than I remembered, but thinner now. Maybe 30 pounds lighter than the last time I saw him at Levy's all those years ago. His black hair had streaks of gray, but the scar on his cheek, that tiny arc just below his right eye, was the same. A permanent comma in his expression. He looked like someone who didn't believe in small talk or guilt. They didn't kiss. They didn't even hug. They just stood shoulder to shoulder, looking at the book, whispering in voices I couldn't quite make out. I leaned forward, slowly, letting my weight shift to the ball of my foot to get a better view. And then he pulled out a flash drive. I froze. Joellen took it without question, slid it into a pocket of the book, and zipped it shut. At this point, I wasn't just suspicious. I was terrified. Because affairs don't require flash drives. Because lovers don't need records. Because no one logs names and dates and locations in a black leather book unless something is deeply, deliberately hidden. I stayed perfectly still, heart slamming against my ribs, the air in my lungs tasting like cold dust and engine oil. Joellen said something that made Emery smile, a slow, lopsided grin that made my skin crawl. Then she reached into her tote bag again, pulled out a manila folder, and handed it to him. He opened it, nodded, said something I did hear this time. That's everyone, then. Joellen answered, quieter, but I still caught it. Except Silas. Except me. They knew I existed. They weren't ignoring me. They were postponing me. I wanted to stand up, say something, burst out from the shadows and demand an answer. But instead I shrank further back, terrified that they'd hear my breathing, my heartbeat, the terrible flutter in my throat like a trapped moth trying to escape. And then, like a magician closing a show, Joellen took a piece of masking tape, wrote something on it, and stuck it on the spine of the leather book before sliding it back into the tote. She didn't say it aloud, but when she turned to leave, the tote on her shoulder, Emery trailing behind her, I finally saw what she had written. 3 words. Block letters. Final draft, clean. The door closed behind them, and I sat there, knees cramping, hands shaking, finally understanding something I hadn't before. This wasn't just a betrayal. This was an operation. And I was the last variable. I didn't open it that night. Not because I didn't want to, I did, but because I knew I had to wait until Joellen was asleep. I had no idea if she suspected me yet. If she'd caught the shift in my tone at dinner, the way I held eye contact 2 seconds too long, or how I let my fork sit still in the mashed potatoes like I was trying to hear thoughts over chewing. She didn't say anything, just scrolled her phone with one hand and pushed green beans around her plate with the other. But when she finally turned off the bedroom light and slipped into that cold, practiced silence she used to call winding down, I slipped out, quiet as smoke. Back to the garage. Back to the black flash drive I'd taken from Emery's pocket folder when he wasn't looking. He left it on the workbench when Joellen walked out to answer a call, or pretend to. I moved fast. I swapped it with an identical one from my desk drawer and slid the real one into my sock. She never checked. Now, alone with my laptop in the dark kitchen, I plugged it in. There was no password, no encryption, no tricks. The folder opened instantly. It was called Exit Package. Inside were 5 documents, all PDFs, no images, no spreadsheets, just text files with titles that made my throat go dry. Phase 1, Emotional Severance. Phase 2, Asset Diversion. Phase 3, Social Detachment. Phase 4, Physical Extraction. Silas_mirror protocol. PDF. I clicked on the last one. It was 17 pages long. The first line read, Subject displays high tolerance for denial, low pattern recognition, and moderate dependency reinforcement. Ideal candidate for slow fade protocol. Subject. Not husband. Not partner. Subject. The rest was horrifying. Not in the way a horror movie is, but in the way that makes your brain start to glitch when your own memories begin to warp under the pressure of new context. This wasn't a personal letter. This was a psychological profile, a behavioral assessment, full of observations, case notes, dates, and evaluations of how I'd respond to stress, emotional absence, confrontation, and intimacy withdrawal. Joellen had documented me, or someone had, and she'd signed off on it. Each page detailed how and when certain emotional cues had been suppressed or introduced, how long she withheld physical affection to test my tolerance thresholds, how she introduced predictable inconsistency to create instability while keeping plausible deniability. There were even notes about when she reintroduced moments of warmth to simulate hope and reinforce bonding, followed by scheduled drop-offs in engagement to increase detachment. It wasn't just betrayal. It was conditioning. My stomach turned as I read what she wrote in one of the earlier notes. July 2021, removed daily affirmations. Subject noted change, but did not vocalize it. Promising. Augmented with light gaslighting. You've been distracted too lately. To deflect. And then later, November 2022, canceled anniversary dinner last minute. Blamed migraine. Subject accepted without question. Internal resistance weakening. And then, toward the end, May 2025, Emery suggests full extraction readiness by Q3. I agree. Silas has emotionally recessed into compliance mode. I doubt there will be any retaliation, even post-exit. Recommend one final conflict to reinforce guilt narrative. My hands were ice. My mouth bone dry. My vision began to tunnel, and I had to physically stand up and walk away from the screen before I threw up. I paced the kitchen like a man on fire, trying to make sense of how someone I'd loved, someone I'd forgiven, someone I'd built a goddamn life with, could have orchestrated something this clinical. This wasn't a breakup. It was a case study. But one thing didn't make sense. One thing kept crawling back into my mind like a splinter under the skin. Why me? Why not just leave? Why go to these lengths? Why spend years running a psychological campaign just to escape someone who never raised his voice, who washed the dishes, who went to her mother's funeral even when he wasn't wanted? And then I saw it. The last line of the protocol document. Small font. Great text. Tucked at the bottom like a hidden signature. File to be submitted to project curation. Batch 6B / archive post-exit. That's when it all shattered. This wasn't personal. It was part of something larger. I didn't sleep that night. Not even for a second. I just sat in the living room with all the lights off, the flash drive unplugged, my laptop still humming as if it had questions too. At 4:12 a.m., I opened every drawer in the house. I wasn't looking for anything specific, just trying to feel like I could still control something. Touching things, counting things, opening and closing the cabinets like they might whisper answers if I handled them right. I wasn't sad. I was done being sad. That part had hollowed itself out of me days ago. Instead, I was angry. But not at her. At myself. I let her erase me in real time. I watched my own life get repurposed into a character study and did nothing. I called it love. I called it loyalty. I called it marriage. But it was sleepwalking. And I was wide awake now. By 8 a.m., Joellen still hadn't come downstairs. I left a note on the kitchen table. Just 3 lines. I know everything. You don't need to explain. I won't be here when you get back. And I wasn't. I didn't leave in rage or chaos. I didn't torture things. I didn't confront her with some messy monologue that would just let her feel like a misunderstood genius. No. I packed a single suitcase, threw the flash drive in a safety deposit box downtown, and drove 4 hours to a cabin my late uncle had left me, one I'd always meant to sell and never got around to. It had no Wi-Fi, no cell signal, the kind of place where silence actually means silence. That first week, I just slept and cried and screamed once into a pillow so loud I gave myself a headache. But the week after that, I started writing again, not in a revenge memoir way, not in some bitter ex-husband manifesto. I just wrote. Bad poetry, short thoughts, things I missed about my kids when they were little, things I remembered loving before I became someone who just got through the day. I bought a sketch pad and tried drawing trees. I took long, ugly walks in the woods. One day I laughed, out loud, at a chipmunk falling off a bird feeder, and I actually felt it in my chest like joy, not performance. I didn't recognize the man I was becoming, but I liked him. 2 months later, I met someone. Her name's Thera. She's not part of Project Curation. She's a wildlife photographer who spilled hot chocolate on my boots in a diner when her lens cap rolled off the counter. She says things like, "Oh no, I'm a disaster," with the kind of grin that makes you want to reassure her, and not because she needs it, but because she's worth it. We talk like real people. No performance. No strategy. No quiet traps hidden in affection. She doesn't flinch when I tell her the truth about Joellen. She just says, "God, that's heavy. I'm glad you're still standing." And I am. More than that, I'm living. I still don't know what Project Curation really is. Some part of me doesn't care anymore. It doesn't matter if she was part of some larger scheme, some twisted psychological collective, or just a woman who couldn't leave quietly without turning it into performance art. What matters is that she left. And what matters more is that I stayed standing after she did. She took the clean version of me with her. But I kept the real one. The messy one. The one who feels things deeply, who believes in loyalty, who still thinks love shouldn't be a strategy. That version of me, the one I almost forgot, is the one I get to keep. And this time, no one gets to erase him.